in a world where a director gets so burned out by a shitty fan base that he goes back to his roots. Literally. Only this time, considering the fact that his roots were a little bit confusing to begin with, he goes back to his weirdo parody days. And this time, instead of parodying neo-noir in a high school setting, he's parodying an Agatha Christie setting. In an Agatha Christie setting. It's basically an Agatha Christie movie. I got nothing. There was a kind of a whole spiel that I had going on, and then I just was like, Agatha Christie, ooh, welcome back, nerds and fellow movie lovers, but mostly nerds, because that's what this community is turned into, because that's kind of the only thing that unites us at this point is the fandom, the nerdom. This is the Talkin TV podcast with yours truly, the movie nerd, Dominic Rizzi, myself. I just like to throw those words out of order every once in a while, and with my faithful co-host. You're not Chewbacca this time, or Chris Baca, whatever you were saying at the last one. Okay,
I'm
good.
Just Chris.
I still hate myself for not having gotten that joke the first time. That's like a swing and a miss.
Yeah, it was a pretty easy one. But
anyways, Chris, please introduce yourself to the people.
My name is Chris. Don't wear it out.
I don't think that's a thing that they can throw it out. Wear it out. Words. Anyways, my brain's fried.
And I'm the one who's sick.
Right? No, bro, you try working in a
what
liquor
are we
store.
here to talk about today?
So first, I feel like I should preface this with a little bit of preface, because words. We were privileged enough to be in the Regal Theater that, like the AMC's and a lot of the other local theaters, was doing an advanced screening because, hey, way to capitalize on a movie by opening it the same weekend as Frozen. Good counter programming. And that would be, we saw an advanced screening. So this movie technically will not be open wide for another week, but considering the fact that every other major YouTube reviewer has already hit it, it's like, who cares? Like, I don't even think actual movie theaters care anymore about.
For once, we're playing ball.
For once, we're a little bit ahead of the curve, if you will, in order to throw in a little bit of baseball terms in here. Again, a sport, and just in general, an idea that I know nothing about. We saw Rian Johnson's new movie, Knives Out. If you couldn't guess from my incredibly well layered and not at all obvious intro. This is Rian Johnson's follow-up to Star Wars The Last Jedi. When I first heard about this movie, after, I think it was only like a few months while I was at school after The Last Jedi. It was in spring 18, and I heard that Rian Johnson was basically doing like an Agatha Christie style whodunit, and it was another one of those things where they were unveiling the cast members. It's like, oh, I think the first two that they announced were Daniel Craig and Chris Evans. Those were the first two they announced, and then it's like, oh, Toni Collette. Oh, she was hot off Hereditary. Oh, Jamie Lee Curtis. She was hot off Halloween. Oh, Don Johnson, because he's going to be in Watchmen. Oh, Michael, and then a bunch of other people. Michael Shannon, Anna de Armas, Catherine Langford, Jaden Martell, Christopher Nolan. Like, the list kept going on and on and on. You know, it's one of those things where it's like, kind of like what the Batman's going through right now. I feel like the Batman is the movie of that's coming out in a few years of this year, where it's like the
star-studded.
Yeah, it's like, but it's not just the star-studdedness. It's that every new cast member, every new addition is like a new story in and of itself, you know, because everything has to be like clickbait articles now. But so
what that makes me is nervous going into a film.
Right, definitely.
In 2019.
Yeah, well, not just in 2019, but in general. It's something that started worrying me. I would say it started worrying me in about 2017. I don't remember the first one, but I remember
recent times, because back in the day, the star-studded cast usually worked out.
Right, but it's also just a different situation of star-studded cast back then with today, where just the idea of movie stars in general has changed so significantly. But
yeah,
well, but besides the cast, besides this being Rian Johnson's follow-up, it's that Rian Johnson is a guy who, like I said, obviously everyone got to know him. He was kind of like the one of the more well-known indie directors. You know, like I said, if he had a few successes, like Brick was a sleeper hit in 2005. Looper was like a decently well-viewed movie within the film community. I still haven't seen it. That's the one of his major movies I still haven't seen. And then obviously he made waves with people getting used to him with The Last Jedi and everything that happened there. But I was interested to see, because I watched Brick a couple weeks ago in order to kind of get a feel for style. Because again, I feel like if you want to get a good feel for a director's style, especially one who's been through, I would say, the ring circus, where they get the indie hit, they get the slightly more well-known hit, and then they get land the huge blockbuster, right? We've seen it fail for a lot more people, specifically in the superhero or Star Wars genre. We've seen it fail for a lot more people than it has succeeded. You know, Mark Webb got screwed over with the Spider-Man movies, Josh Trank with Fantastic Four.
You're talking about the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man?
Yeah, Marvel, again, taking quality out of it. Marvel seems to be the only one that's actually made that work. And again, going back to how, again, every other studio was trying to copy Marvel and failed miserably at it. But I was really interested to see, because so many of the times these directors would land these huge projects and then they would just kind of fall back into obscurity. Like Mark Webb did this one movie a few years ago, ironically enough, with Chris Evans. I know it was about him taking care of his like autistic niece who was like a super genius, and I'm like, ugh, pass. Josh Trank, I've been hearing rumors that he was going to be doing this Al Capone movie with Tom Hardy called Fonzo. I still have no idea what's happening with that movie because outside of the initial announcement like 2 years ago. A few others, but I've never really seen a director, I wouldn't say recover, but kind of just get over the backlash of the original big project and actually like go back to his roots, I would say. And while this isn't exactly along the same lines as Brick, it is again a mystery centered around a murder, and so a murder mystery, if you will. And so I feel like that was just already interesting enough to get me involved. And then the trailers, I thought they were good. They weren't typical like schlock. They didn't have a lot of like really annoying humor that I see in almost every trailer. I've like I said, I just hate trailers mostly. But
I mean, they sold it.
Yeah, well, definitely, but that was intentional, I would say. But
well, yeah, it's a trailer, but it did like I usually hate trailers. It didn't make me hate it.
But the thing that I liked too is that from seeing the actors and the characters that they were portraying, it did feel like a cast that was cast to play characters and not just play like exaggerated versions of themselves, which is, I would say, is a lot of what modern day acting has become. It's always been a facet of acting because of movie stardom and how big star appeal becomes and how that overrides good storytelling in certain actors.
What are you saying? Like using the person, who is really not supposed to be that person. They're supposed to be acting as the character, but using their personality in the actual film. Yeah, I hate that shit.
Yeah, and it's
I
become.
hate that shit. I knew that's what you were saying. I just wanted to clarify in case
but
listeners.
This was a situation where it definitely felt like they were playing actual characters, specifically with I would say Daniel Craig among more so than any of the other ones. But
I would also say, even though her role wasn't as significant as the trailers would have you believe, Jamie Lee Curtis as well.
I would say more so for me, it was Toni Collette. Out of all of them, but again, that's just because of the type of actress that she is. But everything else kind of like fell into their place. Like Michael Shannon is I don't know. Michael Shannon seems to be the only one that I feel like was both weirdly used, simultaneously weirdly used and underused, I would say. Because I love Michael Shannon. Everything I've seen him in, I love him in. Walt, the brother with the cane.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I liked him. I thought he was
fantastic. If you've never seen Boardwalk Empire, he's incredible in that.
It's on my bucket list. Yeah.
It's so good. He's a phenomenal actor. I've seen him. Everything I've seen him in, I've loved. Even weirdly enough, Man of Steel. I thought he was. I enjoyed him as Zod. I thought good motivation, well used character. Again, Man of Steel. Not going to get into that right now, but
right. But you're just painting the picture.
But to go back weirdly enough to what you said. About the trailer being mismarketing and mismarketed is that
not mismarketed. It just like it was a different movie than what I thought.
Right.
Well, I guess like okay.
And so that's kind of what I want to get into. So Chris, how about you open this up and you open up this topic of discussion, because again I feel like that's what kind of gets my brain juices flowing a little bit. Is what did you think overall of Knives Out?
Sure. I just want to first say I am a little sick right now, so I apologize if there's any throat clearing or coughing. It won't happen again.
Joe Rogan does that on his podcast.
Yeah. I just think it's rude when they don't address it, so I'm trying to be a different kind of podcast.
Right.
So forgive me, but hey, man, it just shows that we will get this podcast out regardless of physical ailments.
Yeah.
But so I've been kind of, I guess, keeping quiet, haven't I?
Since we left the theater. It's kind of uncharacteristic of you, I gotta say.
Well, I'm just trying to change it because I feel like I always like.
Well, that and also your physical condition.
Yeah, that too. I'm just trying to change the way I have you think about. I don't want you to think about what I'm thinking about until the podcast starts. So I'm trying to really offer the best conversation.
All right.
So in the spirit of that, what did I think of Knives Out? I enjoyed it.
It's a fun movie.
Yeah, it's a fun movie. I think. I the whole time I was sitting there thinking damn, this is a movie I want to see again with people, because it's one of those it's one of those fun movies to it's going to be a really fun movie, guys, if you go and see this maybe by yourself or with a group of friends, and then another group of friends hit you up, go and see it again, because you'll get to see them go through the twists and turns, which there are a lot of. Some are super predictable, some aren't. And so it's gonna be a fun one for you to it's like a fun dude, you gotta watch this movie because I want to see what you think about it. So for me it's gonna be fun for my social circles, and for that reason, as far as a film goes, it had its problems. What film doesn't? But I think as far as a non-superhero, non-major IP movie that has been released in the theaters in 2019, it's definitely like a little bit above all the rest, in my opinion, especially because I felt like it easily could have leaned on the star-studded cast to bring in the money and sort of fade away quickly. I don't think this movie is going to be, a movie that sort of was like a flash in the pan. Remember when all those guys got together and made that shit film? I'm not saying it's like the greatest movie of all time, but it was fun. And now, however you want to peel back the onion on this, I'm down to do that, but I am in the side of I went into it with no expectations and walked out like I spent good money and had a good time and I liked it.
Definitely. And what I will say is that it is definitely a very crowd-pleasing movie. Most definitely. It is definitely the type of movie that, like you were saying, how you brought up on this podcast several times, where you can go to the theater, you can have just a fun time with your friends, just enjoying it, right? Is that's the one thing I will say is that, again, part of the reason why the giant blockbusters have been dominated so much, not just the giant blockbusters, but the event blockbusters, is because those are kind of the only movies that have become like the things that you can go out in droves with. You can go with your, you can go see it by yourself. You can go see it with a group of friends. You can go back with more friends and see like how they react to it. Part of the fun of movie going, of the theater going experience, that is, again, the one thing that Netflix, I feel, will never truly overcome is the idea of the community aspect to it. Is that
unless you have like a movie theater in your house.
Exactly. So, and with all that being said, I did have problems with it, and weirdly enough, again, talking about how the Twilight Zone, I feel like this is more of a kind of like I'm in a U-boat, where it's like, I enjoyed that after the first time it got out, but as I'm thinking about it, it's like, as I'm peeling back the layers a little bit and getting more so into like the elements, I would say more so into the filmmaking and the actual mystery itself, because the mystery itself, I would say, is very well constructed, but as I think more about the movie, I'm like, there's still, I feel, so much that's missing. And I'll admit part of that is the selfish part of me that like kind of wants to see more from it. But with all that being said, so is this the part where we go into general reviews, or like you want to just?
I
want to
know what you thought was missing. Let's open that up.
All right. So what I thought was missing, I feel like the third act. First off, obviously, again, it's a cliche at this point to talk about the fact of the third act of almost all mystery movies involves everything being revealed, and then there's usually a chase to get the suspect, the final candidate, and then it's boom.
We're talking this movie like, with spoilers, so no one gets fucking spoilers, pissed off.
So there's usually like a twist within a twist within a twist that usually reveals as like, oh, the person who you thought wasn't someone. Oh, and the person who you thought wasn't that was actually this person. It's been done so many points. Community has ripped that off in one of my absolute favorite episodes where Jeff and Andy, they just keep going back and forth and back and forth, and they just keep confusing the dean. It's one of my favorite episodes.
It's a tried and true.
It is a tried and true formula. And so in the sense of trying to do something new and different with those tropes, I will give it a lot of credit. And that basically the entirety of the third act is literally just them sitting in a room and talking and revealing who the killer is and going through previous events. I'm actually shocked at how little action actually happened and how a majority of this is dialogue driven. And for that, I do have to give it a lot of credit. Rian Johnson is somebody who definitely places a lot of emphasis on his dialogue in movies, at least from what I've seen. And that to me is always a bonus, because I love dialogue. Dialogue is one of my favorite aspects of watching movies. And with this, I'm like, yeah, the dialogue is good and everything, and the interactions with the family are fun, but weirdly enough, I feel like they were too few and far between. You know what I'm saying? Like, I enjoyed them. I enjoyed them a lot. Like, whenever the family is together, like, arguing, and, like, it's just, like, you have the one ancillary character who's just kind of reacting to all of them. That was the shit that I really enjoyed. But, the actual mystery elements in terms of how it's set up and how it transgresses. Because, again, in terms of the actual mystery, it's kind of ingenious. Because, literally, the entirety of what you're pitched in the trailers is revealed in the first act, because, again, so this is where we get into spoiler, the entirety of Harlan's suicide is completely revealed in the first act.
I like that.
That is literally what the entire first act is devoted to, is setting up and then immediately going away. It's like, yeah, this is how it happened. They literally show you how it happened within the first, like, 20 to 30 minutes of the movie. I'm like, and that was kind of the first sign to me where I'm like, okay, this is either a genius move or this is a dumb fucking move that's going to blow up in his face.
Yeah.
You know?
If anything, that moment made me think, cool, I didn't waste $15.
Yes.
So,
right.
We'll talk about now if it was, like you said, a genius move or a shit move. Right. I'll let you keep going. But that moment did also strike a chord with me, and I thought to myself, cool.
Yeah.
I didn't waste $15.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. But no, but so like going back to that, it's like,
so yeah, like that moment made me feel like, we didn't waste $15 going to see this film, because I would have been so upset if it was all about finding out what had already been told to us and how it happened.
Right.
Like, that'd be like Clue version 70,000 at this point, which I'm not the biggest fan of these kind of movies because of how predictable they always are, and because of how sitcoms time and time again make fun of them,
right?
And because of just, this is like, it could have been generic filmmaking, generic Formula 101. I don't think this was like some groundbreaking, game-changing movie, but I do think that like it was very self-aware.
Yes.
And I like how it played on that, and I think that is what makes this film something that is more of a standout for me on the 2019, list of movies that I've seen, So, yeah, I think that like it was a roller coaster.
Yeah.
And it was a good, like, most of these films try to give you that roller coaster feeling, but this one, at least, it's like one of the bigger coasters in the park.
Yeah.
You still know what you're getting into, but like it has maybe like 30 more seconds and you get a little bit more G's. You know what I'm trying to say? Like,
yeah,
the picture I'm trying to paint?
And it's funny that you bring that up with the meta elements too, because that was the other thing, is that Rian Johnson also, I've noticed, is a guy who likes to play around with the idea of being meta, but not to the level of like a Phil Lord or Chris Miller. They're the guys that I always go back to for being meta, because again, they're guys that I would say wrote the book on it in terms of just directly pointing out and blatantly making fun of. But with him, it's like he makes his movies in a very self-aware manner, where he knows that that his audience has seen the types of movies that he is modeling this around, and he knows that they know what to expect. And so in terms of playing around with that, I enjoy that very much. But what I feel like is missing is, again, it comes down to the fact of, I ultimately, it comes down to an indecisive factor. I can't decide whether it's great or whether it's, again, it's aiming and like shooting and missing its mark. Because the thing I feel like that made Brick so compelling is the fact that even though, yes, you never in a million years think that that's how high schoolers actually talk, you still get so enveloped and wrapped up in the mystery, and the world is so intriguing, and you have all these bizarre characters that just pop up out of nowhere, and it almost kind of like becomes a little bit Lynchian in a way, where it's like, have you seen Brick?
No, I'll add it to my list.
Okay, yeah, I think you would really like that. And so what I enjoy about that is how I don't think it really feels like it goes into the fold right here.
Well, then let me try and help you figure out if you liked it or not, because yes. I kind of have an idea.
Yeah, but I'm legitimately at a loss. I really am, because like, it's entertaining. It's an entertaining. No, it's an entertaining enough movie, right? It is.
Right,
like,
it's a fine film.
I enjoy the characters. Like I said, my problem comes with the fact of, in terms of the actual family members, I wanted more from them, right? I wanted a little bit more screen time, like, because weirdly enough, for a movie that is pitched on this cast, I would say it's really only 5 major members that really matter towards this. Craig DeArmas, Chris Evans, Christopher Plummer, obviously, and the other detectives that are helping him. They're really it, And so, but again, it's not what the movie is about. So like, am I selfish for kind of like wanting a family drama as opposed to a murder mystery, or is it just the fact that this movie is not satisfying me because it's not making those two elements and genre elements blend together, and kind of it's expecting the meta elements to satisfy me, The meta elements work. They're not poorly well done, but he's also trying to mix in a bunch of different themes about fucking like race relations and our stance on immigration, literally to the point where the movie freaking ends
that was just
with
your
her
typical
standing over the rest of the family. But it's not, though. That's
Hollywood
the thing.
adding that in there.
Yeah,
in my
I get
opinion.
it. It's typical of Hollywood, but it's not typical towards this genre. It's not typical towards this genre, and it's not typical like it's
well, I
really
think that's hard to
confusing.
say, right? Because at least, and correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah,
you're the movie nerd. I'm just the co-host. Right. Is this really because this is a formula film, as we've been saying,
yes.
right? But is this really a formula that's been explored in recent years? Because if it hasn't, well, then we can't really say if it's typical or not, because this isn't new people trying to bring their own take to a tried and true formula. And obviously they're a part of the new Hollywood machine, which is, political campaigns around movies, aka The Revenant, as one example.
Right, yeah, definitely.
So is this movie significant? I'm asking you. Is this movie significant because?
I would say its significance comes from the fact that it's, I would say, just again, just a fun movie to go watch that weirdly enough, I feel like is trying to take a social stance, right? But while also trying to be meta about the genre, you know? It's those three different things that don't really sync up in my mind,
that's
you
true,
know?
because it's got
that's
like
what's
this,
confusing me.
It's got like this, I almost would have liked, who plays Deadpool? What's his name?
Ryan Reynolds.
It almost feels like Ryan Reynolds could have narrated this film.
Weirdly, yeah, you know what? Weirdly enough, you're right. But not just Reynolds, but like Craig almost. I'm half expecting with Craig to just all of a sudden like do voiceover narration, just like Holland may have wanted this, but a certain poet I started to suspect. You know, I feel like that would have been like really weirdly natural, and that might just be me and my knowledge of film and knowing that happens. That happened a lot in old school black and white noir movies, but. I'm baffled by it. You know, like this movie baffled me.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, because like to put those political digs in there about immigration, which is a whole issue with what was her name?
With Anna Darmus's character, weirdly
and her
enough,
mother and
Martha, right? Yeah,
Martha, and you know, they also do like a few lines when they're like having their debate at the dinner table before it all goes down on one of the flashbacks.
Like funny stuff, dude. Like when Don Johnson hands her the plate, all like subconsciously treating her as a servant,
right? As he's trying to be
talking about like
not being racist, not being
hilarious to me.
Yeah, exactly.
That was the shit that like really made me laugh. Like I was dying laughing at that part.
I think like this movie is not. So this movie does, and I think this is the reason why. And tell me if I'm wrong. I don't want to put words in your mouth. Yeah. But to me, it seems like it's a struggle to talk about this film because this movie simultaneously is so meticulous and so thought out. The continuity is amazing. It's almost perfect. I mean, there is no stone unturned that doesn't get answered. It's everything you want from this kind of film. But at the same time, I also think this movie is sort of like a, hey, we're all very serious this day and age. Twitter has become this political battleground, and I just think we need a little escapism, so let's laugh at what is getting our blood boiling at the water cooler throughout the week. Like, to me, it seems like this movie is the story, what the characters are going through is all too real, and then the political statement is sort of like let's just all relax and have some fun and not take the real world too seriously. So there's like two clashing elements to me that the filmmakers have layered in on this, and so that it creates this sort of like happy, sad, or like weird feeling, like when you feel two very contradictory emotions at the same time, and it's not tension. It's like it's like a tickle hurt, like when your elbow hurts, but you enjoy the pain.
Besides the fact that you may have just completely nailed that. Oh my god, that was like completely hit the nail on the head with that.
I'm glad I was just winging it.
Yeah, no, that was good. That was like really fucking good. But other than that, it's also just the fact of the merging of those two. It doesn't exactly work, and it leaves like a weird. It does create for tension, which is good. Like I can't say that the moments in this movie are not tense, both the funny moments and the more serious moments. Right. But at the same time, again, it comes down to. So I feel like a good example of that is Chris Evans' character Ransom in the movie. Right, the whole thing, and I feel like. Why his entire character works is, again, in a more traditional one of these movies, I feel like he would be prime suspect number one, especially once you find out that, like, yeah, he got cut out of the will. But the way that he's built up as the most empathetic character out of that entire family, right? The family, like, from minute one, as they're being introduced, as Daniel Craig is introducing each one of them, they're all revealed to be, like, these self-centered assholes, right? But the movie, weirdly enough, chooses not to focus on that, and instead almost treats that, like, it barely peeks in from, like, a third-party viewpoint by instead focusing on not just the outside perspective, but, again, I don't know, like, I feel like it would like it's missing a golden opportunity in order to like really show just how self-centered and terrible these people are. But in a way, they're really not. They're all just kind of bumbling morons in a way.
Right. They're clearly incapable, and they clearly are coasting off the success of their grandfather.
Right. Like the film very clearly portrays that. Like even if somebody had tried to kill this guy, it wouldn't be any of these idiots. None of these idiots.
Right, and the only one who showed promise was the only one who realized that he didn't have to try and make something of himself because he was loaded, a.k.a. the grandson.
Chris Evans, yeah.
And they also say it multiple times over. The old man, he says it, the grandfather says multiple times over, like, I did this to them. You know? So not only did he put them through all this by coming up with this elaborate, scheme to have Martha survive,
right.
that the second layer is, he babied them. He let them all coast,
You're
right? He gave them the ability to have no abilities.
Right.
And so the grandson, oddly enough, I think takes advantage of that in the best way possible, because he says, well, you know what? Fuck it. I'm loaded. I don't have to make something of myself. So I'm not going to try and be like the rest of my family. I'm going to live a life that most people dream of, a life of fun, wealth, luxury, right? So that's why I think it's him and his grandfather have this connection that they hint at, but you never see, which I loved, by the way.
And I think that might be a little bit of a problem with it. Again, it comes down to, what was the thing that I said on the last of The Mandalorian? Telling instead of showing. All of that is told to us, right? Everything about Chris Evans is told to us by everyone else, rather than showing him. That's why when he comes on screen and you see him compared to everyone else, I mean, yeah, he's a little bit, but it's more so just a fact of it, just because it comes off like his family is just all dickheads to him. And I'm like, yeah, I'm like empathizing with him more than any of these other guys, which I guess, again, that works as the red herring for the final twist in showing how he's ultimately responsible. But again, that just might be a big problem with filmmaking, and a big problem that I have with most movies made today, is so many movies rely on the telling, not showing, in order to speed through the exposition and get to the plot. Now, what I will give this movie credit for is that this movie was a full 2 hours as opposed to hour and a half, and that the exposition, I would say, was cleverly utilized in terms of setting it up, like with the different interviews. The dialogue is fun to listen to. It's obviously not to the level of like Tarantino or Sorkin, but it is fun dialogue. Like, it is an inherently, like, again, it's like you said, it's a fun experience.
There's craft in this movie. There's like I said earlier, there was care, and it's like this movie is, all movies should be multi-layered and make you think, not just from what you're watching, but like, what is the subtext? Like, what is the reading between the lines? But I do think that, like, for all the attention to detail as far as the steps go of the murder mystery, there was some detail left out. Like you said, I would have loved a little more of a compelling reason to have understood why the family thought he was such an asshole. And I would love maybe a flashback of him and his grandfather getting along to solidify and strengthen that.
Yes.
Because we see that with Marta. And so we understand why he gave her the heritage, the house, everything, everything, the publishing.
And there we go. And that's ultimately what it comes down to.
But we don't see why he feels slighted, because we're only told he's the number one contender for the throne, quote unquote.
Yep.
But we don't see their connection like we see with him and Marta. So it's very rare that I think to myself, maybe we could have used like 15 more minutes. Maybe we could have used 15 more minutes. Either way, though, I think this film is very strong all in all. I don't think that's like a nail in the coffin by any means. He's not a young director, but he's not an old director. And so I hope that, like...
directed some of the best episodes of Breaking Bad.
Right. So I hope that this is just another positive step in his growth, in his career, that hasn't had all successes,
right?
But not all failures either.
That's the thing. It's for It's for the most part success. Like, people love Rick. People for the most part love Looper. Nobody talked about his movie Brothers Bloom. That's literally the only movie of his that I've heard nothing about. Like, nobody has talked about that movie. Last Jedi, obviously, we know everything about. But again, I think that ultimately is what it comes down to. Is that you're right? It's missing that extra stuff, seeing the family relationship and tension that goes into it, right? And rather than kind of expecting us to already buy into something that's told to us and not really getting the chance to go along with it. It's like I keep saying, it's that instead, now, this is what movies do now. Instead of actually constructing a world and showing the characters and how they're interacting with both the other characters, with themselves, and the world in order to establish the conflict, instead, everything is just told to us, and then the rest of the movies rely off of tropes and our association and our knowledge of those tropes in order to get us through, for the most part, well-written stories. And that is ultimately, I feel like, can sum up my problems with this movie.
I agree. I think that there's really... I have nothing else really to say on that matter. I think that that's something to consider if you're listening to this episode. Before you go and watch it, don't expect the world, expect a fun time.
Yeah.
And if you have watched it, like, let us know. Are we missing something in regards to this? But I kind of agree with you. I feel like we agree with each other. That being said, this movie, there's not much flash. There's not much, like, wow, awe. It's really more traditionalistic in the sense of, like, the way it feels like an older movie just shot on, like, a brand new camera, right? So we got to talk about like the performances and the characters.
Definitely. But just also real quick, just to go to your point about the shooting and the lighting specifically, and how it like basically like you said.
You said to me during the film.
I mentioned like some of the lighting techniques. I actually thought that was like really clever. The scene where De Armas and Chris Evans are sitting in the diner, and she gets a call from Captain Langford, and the way that the light goes down on Captain Langford's face, and then with like the cross lighting with the shadows on both Ana de Armas, like I actually thought that was really cool, because that's the first time a movie's actually like I've noticed like shadows and light and how it's utilized. Like that's something I really can't say about a lot of other movies I've seen just in general.
The only other example that comes to mind is that my favorite lighting scene ever, which is from Under the Silver Lake, where he first meets the love interest girl who goes into the catacomb at night, and she's just so glowing and beautiful. The lighting's so nice there, and that really accents a moment. And I think this movie had multiple times where the lighting, or lack thereof lighting, in the scene I'm talking about, where Daniel Craig's "You're still here," she says to him as she steps out, having her fucking panic attack, because at that very point in time, she really thinks she killed him.
Yeah.
And he's sitting there in the shadows, in the cold, smoking a cigar like a lunatic.
Yeah.
And all you hear is his voice, and then he sits forward like the villain, but he's not the villain.
He's not. And that's hilarious. It's great. It's so funny. Like, Craig is hilarious in this movie because he's simultaneously a bumbling moron, but at the same time, he is a good detective.
Even he made the film for me.
At the end, he's like, she's like, when did you figure it out? He's like, I figured it out the minute that I first laid eyes on you. So I love, like, and again, going back to it, it's like, I wish we'd had more of that. Why didn't we see more of that? The fact of, again, like Jake Peralta, like fucking all the other times where we've seen these guys who just come off like bumbling morons, but they're the smartest ones in the room, you know?
So what I think is maybe there are like 2 or 3 characters that could have gone. Maybe we knew that they existed, but we really didn't need their performances. More specifically, like the daughter who's trying to go to college.
The daughter and the son. What was his purpose in the movie?
The little kid, the Nazi jerking off in the bathroom.
Kid Bill.
Him, and I think you can also make an argument for the husband of
Don Johnson.
Jamie Lee Curtis.
Yeah.
You can make an argument for that. You can tell me I'm wrong on that one. I won't be upset.
Literally, again, just fuel to the fire of like how, but like unlike the other three, where it's like they at the very least had clear set out motivation. Jamie Lee Curtis wanted the house, Toni Collette wanted the fortune, and Michael Shannon wanted the publishing empire. Right, those 3 motivations. But it's like Don Johnson, his whole thing. Oh, he's cheating on his wife.
And he's a part of the family.
But for what? It's like, he doesn't want a part of Walt's legacy. His whole thing, Chris Evans even said it, his whole thing is he lives in fear of his wife because of their prenup, you know?
Yeah, and yeah, exactly. And so, you know, it's one of those things where, like, the star-studded cast strikes again. Maybe there was just... the casting department was like, we're on a roll. We have a lot of fucking, you know. So, but we can't speak to that.
Right.
But I can only think that if this movie maybe was one big name, maybe just Daniel Craig as a detective, and everyone else was, you know, just mid-tier actors, good actors regardless. I think maybe that there would have been some realization where we can trim some fat, but you don't want to cut away stars from a star-studded cast, right?
Right.
That's my speculation.
Maybe like just a different.
Do you agree with that? Or?
Yeah, a little bit, but like just a different reformation. You know, more emphasis on character and less on reliance on just the expectations that the audience has. Right. You know, it's like, again, it's ultimately what it comes down to. Stop telling me stuff. You know, and what's even worse, stop telling me stuff and expecting me to just be fooled by it. I'm not going to do it. You know, it's the same bullshit that Marriage Story tried to pull, but I won't get into that. But
yeah, but I think like this movie, you know, while it very much so was a lot of exposition, I think it realized that it was going to have to be. And so I think like there could have been a little more show don't tell, but I do think that like the exposition we had was done in an entertaining way. Like, I was entertained the whole time watching this movie. Like we said, there was some amazing lighting and there was some amazing cinematography.
Yeah, good set design too. I really enjoyed the set design.
Good set design, especially from
when they said this was an Agatha Christie esque murder mystery, like I felt that. Like I legitimately did.
Oh yeah, for sure. And it was very minimalistic in its entirety, right? You know, I mean, everyone you pretty much meet in the first 15 minutes of the film is that those are all the people. Yeah. The locations really don't vary that much.
Right. It's like outside of the mansion, it's like what? 2 other locations?
Exactly.
Maybe it's like her apartment and the fucking the coroner's office.
Yeah, exactly. And so like that to me shows the strength of this film, that you are pretty much given all the tools you need at the beginning, but you don't get bored. Instead, you are intrigued. And there are some nice twists and turns that keep you going. But yeah, so I just think a lot of great performances, but also a lot of unnecessary.
Definitely.
A lot of unnecessary
It's a lot
ones.
of fluff is what it is. And
Yeah.
Again, like I said, just characters, storylines that just confuse me, that are just there, that are just unnecessary. And this is probably the first time that I've ever noticed it to the point where it bothers me, because there's been a lot of different cases where different YouTubers have pointed out, I was like, oh, why was that storyline there? They were just there. Like, for example, I think the most recent example to me is Rhodey and Rocket in Endgame, where it's like, of all the people that went into the quantum realm, all the Avengers that went into the quantum realm, those two had nothing to do, literal character-wise, where their two are literally, once again, just playing the best friend roles. At the very least, Rocket had something compelling to do, kind of like being like a bounce off of to kind of reflect Thor's pain. But in this one, they kind of, that's the one thing I'll give you, they're kind of just repeating things, where at the very least, the other eight all had stuff that they were doing, all had very compelling arcs from beginning to end. But again, that didn't bother me because it's the Avengers, I'm not going to complain. I like the Avengers movies. They're entertaining enough, But with this one, it's like, there were just points where I'm like, oh man, why did you have to go there? Why did you do this? But weirdly enough, I wasn't thinking about it while I was watching the movie. This didn't happen until after I left, and as I was coming back, and as I was
That's
thinking
what I'm
about
saying.
it more.
Like, you're not thinking on a roller coaster like, wow, this is a bad roller coaster.
Right.
You're
enjoying the thrill. You're
enjoying
the
the
rush
moment.
of endorphins.
And then afterwards, you have some time to sit back and be like, oh, the King Dakar was a little better than the Superman. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, definitely.
So,
That's actually a really good analogy. Yeah, where it's like, I'm enjoying it because I want to know who did it, and I'm coming, I'm doing what I do, and I come up with my theories. And I think at some point I even pitched you, was like, yeah, Harlan faked his death, because that's kind of something that I was hoping for, It's like, yeah, he faked his death, and now he's doing
you were
all this.
invested. You were into it, and you were trying to crack the code.
Like, it locked me in, and it got me into it. And then when they revealed to be Chris Evans, I'm like, oh,
yeah.
Of course it was, because that would be obvious. It's somebody that was in there, like I was waiting for like the church. I was waiting for lack of a better word, I was waiting for the Shyamalan twist where it's like, whoa, I did not see that coming, And again, Shyamalan kind of ruined the idea of the twist, because I literally can't think, obviously, like I said, there has to be a twist in all of his movies to the point where it's been parodied to death, but I do think that there is some element to the fact of, and obviously the fact of when he made his twist, he didn't have the internet. But again, the thing that I go back to is Split, where, I'd heard rumors that he was doing an Unbreakable sequel, and there had been rumors for years that there was an Unbreakable sequel in the works, but that's not on my mind when I'm watching Split, And, I'm watching them, like, for the most part, a psychological thriller where it's like, oh, but I'm like, okay, I'm not really sure how this makes sense. But then when you bring in that twist and pull back the window in already, and how he manages to keep that a secret for almost 20 years and still shock the hell out of me in an era where the internet spoils and ruins almost every cool thing about movies. That's where I'm like, whoa. So then when you get something like this, which is very obvious, which is a story structure that has a twist already built into it by nature, that's when I'm like, okay, you really got to shock me in order to do something different here. Where obviously Clue's whole, the charm of Clue is, besides the fact of Tim Curry and he can make anything, Clue was already doing self-aware before self-aware was really a thing. And Clue also had the idea, again, the multiple endings, where it's like every single one of those, it's like, it's the fun of working your way back through it and seeing, oh, this was how it happened, But again,
it is
in terms
fun.
of trying to deconstruct that, it's literally to the point where the entire third act is just breaking that down and literally just explaining and telling to you, So I think that's where my problems from this film comes from, is in its deconstruction of the tropes of the genre. It kind of ruins to me what makes a good film, It sacrifices a lot of good storytelling for just straight up telling,
Yeah,
and just relies on the meta factor.
I think Daniel Craig really saved the aha moments of this movie with his performance.
And then just for his sheer performance of his character, because for whatever reason, weirdly enough, Daniel Craig is always pulls off like a great Southern character. I don't know what it is, but like he steals every scene that he's in Logan Lucky. What's it called? And in this too, his accent,
he's a steam
it's never
sealer,
annoying.
especially in a star-studded cast. I think
Definitely.
Daniel Craig takes the prize here.
Definitely.
Marta as well. She was great.
Yes,
she
and,
played.
and I would say, but weirdly enough, again, with the exception of the third act, but again, I can't blame the character for that. It's mostly for the story structure. But in terms of well-written characters, I think Ransom, Evan's character, is probably the best written character, and also Plummer too, for that matter.
Which is
Harlan.
ironic too, because I agree with that. But he also we also talked about how we wanted more from him.
Right.
So I think this movie again. I mean, my speculation is what I'm realizing hearing you talk, at least in my perfect world, if Chris has the final say, right? This movie suffered from what I also think it benefits from,
Yes.
which is the star-studded
100%.
cast. Not being able to cut
I don't agree with that.
performances just because you want that name attached to it. I think we have to think about marketing. I think we have to think about how movies like this compete in this Disney marketplace. So the more names you get attached to it, even if it's for something that, and I don't think the filmmakers realize this in the moment, they just want to do something that holds up to, like, you know, what people expect from cinema. So to me, that's what I'm sort of realizing.
I guess,
about
but at the
this.
same time, I also don't think, because at the end of the day, the actors are just there to do a job. You know, it's not a situation of where, like, the cast, I feel like, took away from it. It's distracting, definitely, in terms of how little the actual cast is utilized. So in that sense, it's underwhelming. But in terms of, like, my actual problems with the movie, I can't put that entirely on the cast. It comes from the fact
it's the creative people who made the decision to cast.
It puts more of an
write the
emphasis
script
on the deconstruction, or it puts more of an emphasis on the deconstruction of the story over the story itself. You know, you can have the deconstruction, right? How many times? But it has to have the story too, you know? And I think what happened was that Rian Johnson got a little bit too far down the rabbit hole of, even in great deconstructions, the story, it still follows the same tropes, you know, where it's like, you know, people said Moana was a great deconstruction. People say Shrek is a great deconstruction. Where it's like, I feel like Shrek is probably the best example where, Shrek deconstructs every single fantasy trope while still being fairy tale and fantasy trope while still being a really good fantasy fairy tale, because it still ends with the main character getting the girl at the end, you know, and having the happily ever after. It's just a matter of the main character in a sense is not the perfect prince, but it's the ogre, you know, but again, 2001 versus today. And I feel like, again, why Brick seems to be a fluke is because Brick is still his only movie where the story was good enough to back up the deconstruction. And every single, like I said, I haven't seen Looper, so I feel like Looper will be the final say in that. Mm-hmm. But every single movie that I've seen from him, the deconstruction and overcomes the story itself.
I want to rewatch Looper with you through the deconstructionist scope.
I haven't even seen it, so.
I do still stand by my thinking and my reasoning as to why I think it suffered for me as a viewer, but I also can't say I don't agree with that as well. I think it's a hard line to walk as a deconstructionist filmmaker if that's the stories you want to tell.
I think we can both agree on. Rian Johnson, that is what he's established. You know, I think he's like, this is his 6th film, I want to say. So it's like that is what he's established. No, 6th or 5th film. That is what he has established himself as.
And if that's who he is as an artist, that's awesome. We need those kind of artists. It's just a hard line to walk.
Yeah.
And I don't think those kind of film.
You
have to realize that this is it's a tough type of film making process.
Most definitely.
It's not. You're not gonna.
But I'll tell you what my worry is. My worry is that it's becoming intentional. Is that it may not have been intentional.
To what has worked in the past,
maybe. Not just that. It's that he recognizes what he does, and whether he knows it's wrong or not, he knows that that's what gets people into his movies. And so he's going to keep doing that as a result, and that's going to prevent him from growing and becoming an even better filmmaker, you know?
Well,
and in a way that's going to keep hindering him going forward.
Yeah, I'll use my music background here for a second. You see that with a lot of musicians where they, establish a sound with a few albums early on and it's working for them, and then maybe they try and change it up a bit, and if it doesn't go over with the audience as well as they would like, usually 9 times out of 10 to save the career and the fan base they've built up, they go back to somewhat of an original sound on that album after they took a step outside the box. They get back in the box to sort of like revitalize the audience they had beforehand and just stick to what works. So, maybe I wonder if he's, as a filmmaker, might fall into that same
a little bit. And like I said, it's obviously The Last Jedi thing was polarizing, but guess what? For just as many people that I know that hated that movie, there are a lot of people that like that. And again, and the problem is that if The Last Jedi was a good movie, again, I'd be inclined to be like, yeah, good for him. Good for being another rebel filmmaker, especially for one that made, again, the most divisive Star Wars movie ever, for Disney. And I, weirdly enough, somehow being the only creator that Kathleen Kennedy did not have a problem with. How the fuck that happened, I have no idea. It still baffles me. But
he could be easy to work with.
Again, I feel like a large part of that has gone to his head, where, again, he spent months, a year, I would say, after The Last Jedi came out, just firing back and going back after the haters and everybody that was going down after him. And again, the problem was, once again, like every single fan base does, they went after the movie for the complete wrong reasons, and even to the point where they went after the stars for the complete wrong reason. I'm sorry, say what you will about the Disney era of Star Wars. No star in that movie deserves the hate that they got just for them being like, they weren't even going after Kelly Marie Tran.
Oh, the performances were fine.
Yeah, no, but it's not just that.
Aside
They
from-
weren't even going after Kelly Marie Tran for for giving a bad performance or for her character being a shittily written character. They went after her for the fact that she's an Asian woman in Star Wars. That's the shit where it's like, okay, you guys just need to shut the fuck up, and the fact that this is still happening is ridiculous. But
yeah, we don't know the species that live in the
right,
galaxy
but what
far
I'm trying
away.
to go for,
But let's bring it back to Knives Out.
Right, what I'm going for specifically with Rian Johnson is that you have all these people praising him for a genius without actually knowing what it is that makes his work good. And that's my problem. Is again, it's the incessant, again, that's my worry with the hardcore fan base. Kind of like going back to why we're doing this, just rabidly cheering him on with no reason other than the fact of there's other people that are doing it.
Well,
That's my worry.
I will say this, right? I think that there's one of two things. Either he's figured out a way to play in the new set of rules that have been established for filmmakers who aren't working with a major IP to see success, whereas he knows how to borrow from those types of films, like those types of, like the beats, like the Baby Driver joke. I think that actually hurts this film, but everyone in our theater...
All the pop culture references, I would say,
all the
were
pop
garbage.
culture... I don't think this is the
They
type
barely
of...
worked for me at first, and then as they kept going on, I'm like, okay, stop. And they did. I will say they did. I think that was the last major one.
But there was still a lot early on, and I think that dates this kind of movie.
Yes,
I don't think
it does, absolutely.
And so that works in 2019, right? Like, this might be a movie... I think this movie will see some success, and I think people will enjoy it. But
it depends. I promise. I think it both opening up on against Frozen and also on Thanksgiving. It might, but we'll see.
Either way, I think that what stops this film from potentially going on to have a legacy and being taught in film classrooms one day is because they dated it. They had beats that we have, I like to call, been Disneyified, brainwashed in a sense in this film, even in this film, you know? And so that maybe is him playing within the lines. He's still a human being who has to make money. He's accustomed to a certain way of life.
Of course.
He now wants to keep making
Especially
millions.
now.
So maybe we can't say if he is or not, but maybe he's taken that into account as a filmmaker, and maybe that shows. But what I do know is that this movie could have been way more than it was. It dated itself. It had these beats that I don't think are timeless. I think that are very much the aughts this decade. And it's just very, the teens, sorry. And it's just very unfortunate because this movie could have been so much more. And that's all I got in conclusion before we go to giving it our stars.
Definitely, yeah.
Right? Because
Pretty much.
and this is why, like, I'm not trying to be a prick. I'm not trying to be an asshole. I just think you guys don't realize what this 34% ownership Disney takeover of the entertainment industry really does. It's a trickle-down effect.
Yep.
Which I think this movie was fine. I liked it. But it could have been something way more.
Yeah.
You know?
Definitely.
So I think I finally, for once, don't sound like an asshole talking about Disney on this podcast,
Which is funny,
which is
of
great.
course, we still haven't managed to do a single podcast without without dropping some Disney shade. But yeah,
We can't. We can't this day and age.
We have
Until
to.
things
We have
change,
to.
we can't.
Just for sheer fact of, again, regardless of whether they're putting out quality, which again, I'd say they largely haven't, especially this year. But just for what they're doing for the business of movie making, it's we have to. We're the last line of defense, if anything. You know, they've already gone out of their way to show how ineffective we are.
We're in the
terms of
trenches, man.
In order to determine box office, you know, which again is the only thing that they care about. So. Yeah, but
With that
honestly,
being
I have to thank you though, because again, just in terms of our conversation, you kind of helped clarify a lot of the confusion that I had going towards this movie, and
Well, this movie was
overall-
nonstop. The pacing.
Yeah, the pacing is great. The pacing is
rapid.
legitimately great. There's not a single moment in this movie where you're bored or you're waiting.
It was
Oh my
great,
god, get
but
this
it was-
scene wrapped up.
It was rapid fire,
Yes.
so it was a lot to process.
Definitely.
And especially since we literally wasted no time getting back here
Pretty
to
much.
the
Like, it
studio
was
to record
boom,
this.
right in.
So,
Yeah.
so do you feel
Yeah,
comfortable moving
let's do
into
star rating. So my star rating, I would say, is that I was initially going to give this a 4, but after our discussion, I got to go 3.5. 3.5. There was just too much for me that was holding this movie back from getting it to the extra level 4. It was never going to be a 4.5 movie for me to begin with, you know, just for specifically how they utilize the cast, and for now that I'm coming to terms with it, once again, the deconstructionist elements overcoming the good story elements to me, that it's a 3.5 movie at best.
So when we first got in there, I was like, "Oh no." I was scared.
Oh, trust me, I had
And
those
so
moments too, where I'm like, oh god.
It felt like a 1. and then it quickly jumped up to like a 4.5. But I think it's a 3.5 for me as well.
It's a 3.5 movie. It's
3.5.
3.5. Boom!
Yeah.
For the once, we have the same
agree.
star rating.
We agree.
But yeah, so that was ultimately it. It's a fact of it's a good entertaining movie. It's a good popcorn movie. Like I can say that nobody that goes to see this movie will be bored or not have a good time. It's
a different kind of popcorn movie.
It was for once.
But it has familiarities.
How many other times in a movie theater that wasn't a Marvel movie or a big event movie did you see people just having fun laughing at a movie? And there were a lot of moments in the movie where I was legitimately laughing hard. There were some
I was gonna say not only was it packed, but the people were into it. So if anything, with the holidays coming up, you're gonna be seeing friends you haven't seen in a while. You're gonna be seeing family you haven't seen in a while. And if that Thanksgiving dinner gets a little too awkward and you need something to cut the tension with,
that's not Disney.
Go grab a knife and Knives Out.
And watch Knives Out.
I
love the pun that you chose to end it on.
Speaking of watching things, Dom, is there a way you usually like to leave?
Well, that's the thing, because I was actually going to drop a hint for our next episode that will be coming out next week.
Of course.
We got a gangbusters one coming out for, again, not only, from what I've heard about this movie, not only the movie of the year, but the perfect movie to end the decade with, and just everything we know about a certain filmmaker who I think hates Marvel movies even more than you do, Chris. So,
Can't be possible.
I think that's all the hints that I'm going to leave there. But, in terms of plugs.
We're talking about The Irishman.
Yeah. Thanks for spoiling it, Chris. God.
Well, I want him to know, man. I want him to know we're talking about The Irishman. It's going to be a great fucking time.
Yeah, that's going to be
regardless
of
if it's
that's going to be, oh, man. You want to talk about a situation where we're going to need a little bit to process. Oh, man. But, yeah, in terms of plugs, Anchor, Spotify, Apple Music. Chris, you do the rest that I can't remember.
Apple Podcasts, Deezer, Radio Public, Pocket Casts.
All the ones that Anchor sends out to.
Our distributor. Our podcast is there. You can find us on social media at Talkin TV. TALKIN TV. Just follow us. I was a little sick this week, but we spent a lot. I'm just going to let him into the process.
Let him in.
We spent like 5 hours one day, like crafting a plan, and we're following through on it. Taking this shit seriously. So, there's a reason why we're here on a Friday night when all of our other friends are out doing whatever they're doing. We're giving our time up to our craft because honestly, I'd rather do this anyways.
Me too.
But like, we're trying to make it
fun.
This was a lot of fun. But we're trying to make it work. And so follow us on all those platforms to help us, get this thing working.
And
at
on
a faster
Facebook
pace.
and Instagram at Talkin TV Podcast on both of those. And that is it with
episodes every Saturday.
Every Saturday.
For the foreseeable future.
Every Saturday
at
noon sharp. And with that, guys, the only thing I have left to say is watch more fucking movies.